Yes, good morning again, people. This is Spirit Journey. Yeah, this is my second video of the day. Today is Tuesday, July 21st, 2020, and the time right now is 7:09 a.m. I want to talk about another matter. It's going to be on race and racism in America. And as it pertains to certain things of my life as a black woman. I want to talk about Hollywood in particular. I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, I was watching a very controversial TV show, The Little Rascals. It was also known originally as Our Gang. Now, those of you who don't know The Little Rascals or Our Gang, it was a little um, mini movie clips. I think each one might have been like 10 or 20 minutes long. It originally came out, this show, in 1922. And it was made in California. And that was early movie making, 1922. So it was at that time, 1922, there was no sound. It was silent, no audio, and then they had to like dub in the music. And it lasted. Let's see, the show continued. It was bought out in 1930 by MGM Studios, and then from like 1930 to 1944 was the last show. It depicted little children. They like to use toddlers, and I think the oldest one might have been 11. They cap out at around 11 or 10 years of age. And that was during you know, the Depression, much of the show, 1930. So these weren't rich kids. These were kids, they hardly had adults around them. These kids had their own life. They, they entertained themselves. And in those days, they entertained themselves with playing ball, go-karts. They're very social. And another unique thing about the show, it had black people. It had black and white. They were mostly male, and it had a few females. And I have to be honest, I loved the show growing up as a young child. It came on television um, in 1950. So I started watching, let's see, the early 70s. I remember watching it. And I loved the show. Why I liked the show was because these were young people, and I was a young person. And my world was very uh, sheltered. And I wasn't allowed to go places. And these little kids, they seemed to go everywhere. And I wanted that. And so for me, I almost saw them as adults because they're so precocious. But they were kids. But I was that enamored by them because wow, they have to be adults because they were allowed to do things and they had an adventure. That's what I liked about it. And I was told that Bill Cosby, who's now in jail, in prison for um, date rape, but he had bought I was told he bought the rights of the Little Rascals, because of racism in the film. And I started thinking about that show, The Little Rascals, and so I said, well, I know Bill Cosby, that um, he has all the right, he owns all the rights to that show, so it wouldn't be on the internet. And I said, let me just check it out. So I typed in The Little Rascals on YouTube, and lo and behold, it's there. So I started watching them. And a lot of them is on YouTube. And let's see. It brought back nostalgia because I remember a lot of the different shows, but I have to admit, some of the shows were racist on it. They had, and I saw it this one just 1 or 2 days ago, about this Uncle So and So. It was kind of confusing. That it was a white family, but they had an Uncle So and So. I forget the uncle's name. Let's say his last name is Jim. I don't remember the name. But I'll make up a name, Uncle Jim. And he was part of a show. And this one was, he played what you call a wild man. And he's wearing a large bone in his nose, grass skirt and feathers in the hair. And the only thing he knew how to say was yum yum, eat 'em up, eat 'em up. And his passion was just eating candy, and implying that he was cannibalistic, and that the kids went to visit their uncle so and so, Uncle Jim, and this guy, goes berserk and is chasing the kids, and so it was stereotyping that people now this was a white man, but he's has the makeup on and all the the costume to make him look like he was a person of color and a cannibal. So it was clear that one was clearly racist. And there was another one, but overall, I thought the show was creative. The answer went because see the kids they played, and when there was conflict, they worked it out. In fact, I felt that they worked out problems better than some of the adults. But there were episodes that would definitely be considered very insensitive to like certain themes, like they had they had a character, and in fact I found out that the maker of the show originally had in mind just a black character, Farina. I think it was Farina. Yeah, Farina was one of the first characters and had that character in mind. But they didn't want, in those days, the whites didn't want to always see a black person. They didn't feel that a black person should have more billing than the white people. It was during racist times, definitely. But according to Wikipedia, that when it was being created, they had a black character in mind, but he had to modify it. The black characters, I couldn't, even back then when I was a child, I couldn't tell what was this Farina. Was this a boy or a girl? And buckwheat also. Is it a boy or girl? And the character was supposed to be a girl. And then it morphed when the character needed to be a boy, then they could get a boy. But in one of the episodes, this is one of the earlier ones. I think it was made in 1924, and it was with Stymie, and he was a toddler at the time. He was about 2.5, and he was with. They had a black female. She like a love interest. Like I noticed in this series, they sexualize the female. That the females, black or white, always had to be sultry and kissy kissy. That I noticed now as an adult, seeing this, many years later. As a little child, I didn't really notice, but now as an adult and watching what I watched as a kid, then you can see through certain things. And it's that particular episode. It was actually an exquisite dark-skinned black female, little girl. She could have been maybe 4 or 5, and then the Stymie, who might have been maybe 2.5, 3 at the most. And there was to kiss, and they put a hat to cover their face and to kiss. It turns out in those days, black people weren't allowed to kiss on TV. You couldn't publicly see it. You couldn't see it. But interesting, the white characters were allowed to kiss. And they even showed a part of an adult black man and woman, and they too had to have a hat and cover their face to get just a little peck. So it's interesting that, yes, it was during very racialistic times. But the credit to the show, though, was that it did show black and white children, and they were very creative. They created games. And interesting, one of those episodes, I'm trying to remember. It was an episode with Stymie, a very major character, a black character. He's the one that wears the big hat, and he has a bald head. One episode is the dog Pete, or Petey, and there was a dog catcher, and Stymie sees that they're collecting dogs to put in the pound. And back in those days, they euthanized the animal. They killed them. So he hit his dog, but the dog got, loose. I have to back up a little bit. Well, he sees the dog catcher. So he puts his dog, he thought, in safety, and then he went to rescue the neighborhood dogs from this. It was in a truck. So he let all the dogs loose, and a little white girl was witnessing what was happening, him releasing the dogs from the truck. And he takes the dogs, Stymie takes the dogs over to where he and his dog was. But the neighborhood kids see the guy with their dogs. Hey, you trying to steal our dogs, blah, blah, blah. And then he's crying. And I thought I was interested that the Stymie was crying. He said, I wasn't trying to, So again, it's like assuming when you see a black person that his activities must be something negative, or he's a thief. That also, I see it as a common theme, that they have the black child snitch on everybody to, fess up on what's going on, what's this and that. And they wanted to beat him up. And then the little girl, white girl, who witnessed what happened, ran and actually protected him and pushed the white boys away from Stymie, the black kid. It says, no, he wasn't trying to steal your dogs. The dogs were in the dog pound, the dog catcher's truck. and they were going to take the dogs away. He was rescuing them. And says, "Oh, okay." And they say, "Okay, could I be in your gang now?" They say, "Oh, yeah, sure." And I think they actually shake hands. See, even though that movie was made during extreme times, I think that episode might have been in 1930 or 31, and the racial climate was not the best for blacks in America at that time, definitely. But here you have a white girl protecting the interests of that black boy and spoke out and told the truth. Hey, no, he rescued those dogs, your dogs, from the dog catcher. And then in that melee, the dog catcher takes Stymie's dog and put it in the dog catcher. And it's really interesting. And they eventually, his dog gets saved. It's a really interesting episode how whites interact and the white adults acted, and it was really interesting how the interactions of whites with the blacks they have in those days. They had black and whites children in the same classroom, and I thought that was interesting. And they weren't sitting all the way in the back either. It was an interesting relationship. Some of the episodes they have the blacks as the dominant character, almost like a leader, and then other times they show the whites. But it in general it showed them all on equal standing. But at the same time, some of the black characters, you know, is it a boy? Is it a girl? So I think that aspect of gender, one, to save money, but why didn't they save money and get with the white characters? They clearly had white girls and white boys, but they didn't have uh, black boys and black girls in this show. The only time I saw a black girl outside of a parent, but as a child, once, and that was the one with when Stymie was about 2 years old, and in the kiss, and it was a pretty black girl. Oh, beautiful, beautiful, dark complexion black female, absolutely beautiful. And that's the first time I ever saw a black girl in it. Clearly, a black girl. I think also in those days, as for gender and why they showed, see, again, the creator of the Little Rascals was a white man. I don't know what his ethnicity was, but to so-called save money as it pertains to blacks, and just get a black person playing both gender. Um, Gender was sexuality was an important factor in hindsight with that movie, the Little Rascals, the series. They had the black child that wearing these ribbons in the hair, like what they call plaits, braids, and they had like ribbons all over. It characterized um, the black. I think also they didn't want to show. They wanted to mock black people, mock our looks, to exaggerate certain things in dress. Um, it didn't want to portray the black female as someone who's really beautiful. Only that one time did they show it, and the girl actually was older than the boy. She could have been maybe 4 or 5, and then the Steinman was maybe most 3 years of age. But to show the, the, that black people could be sexual, could be flirty and things like that. It didn't want to sexualize show the black female as someone pretty and adorable. It was more to laugh at. So that aspect was a racist component to the Little Rascals, that black women weren't to be considered beautiful. So we were to only be laughed at. And I started analyzing. I said, why is that? Well, if you're growing up in the world, and the United States is very, very big in a landmass, and you have to, Hollywood is a force that was used originally to brainwash the people. The first motion picture was a picture against black people. I forget the name of the picture, but it was about, it depicted the Klansmen, and to alarm the white people in America that black people are rapists. And that's basically what the movie was about, to fear, to have white people become afraid. And that was the beginning of Hollywood. So actually, Hollywood is an enemy of the black race in America. If you look at its origins, it was designed to have us to make white people afraid, and to dehumanize black people, to not love yourself, and to remove our real, relationships. When I almost lost a train of thought. Now, so you had that movie, that first movie that was made, that was an anti-black film. Now, if Hollywood or the movie industry is there to design how you are to think about certain peoples, now they don't. You believe what you see. And if they show a black woman, even a pretty little black girl, now you're going to have people who are going to like that little black girl, and it's going to be maybe some white people, white boys. They want to teach you to dislike her, or just that she's a mockery. So you won't be sexually interested in her. But they clearly show little white girls very flirty, very sexual, and to find her desirable. And so even with the black characters, like they had a rich white girl, and the boys, and even some of the blacks in that show will comment, yeah, she's a pretty girl. But they don't want you to feel that way with a pretty black girl. So it's designed to keep you away from the black female, because again, if a white person has a black female to date or marry, then you're going to have kids. And historically, who was the slave in America? That black woman. See, when social status was dependent upon the status of the mother. So if your mother, whatever status your mother is, regardless of race, initially, that was the status of the child born from that womb. So historically, if the black woman in America was a slave, then whatever comes out from that womb is that status. So they didn't want to create interracial unions using black women, because again, historically, her status was one of a slave. And so they didn't want to promote that. So keep them separate, have her in roles. So she was either a very overweight, very dark-skinned woman, and very, what you call, sassy. Then they didn't show her as socially. Now beauty comes in all shades and sizes. And it'd be wrong to say that only if you're slim are you attractive. That would be a lie. That's not accurate. Beauty is what beauty does, right? But I'm just using the social context, what Hollywood and what its measure of beauty was, depicted the black woman as not being sexually attractive, and to not to take her seriously. So you train people to not see her as something sexual. Again, even when they're little children, cover their face when they if they were in a kiss. So it's to remove that component from us, that humanity, or that you could love somebody, and so we have to hide that. But they're very open about, let's say, if they want you to think that they're stealing something or that there be mischief, that they're very open in showing in the movie The Little Rascals. So, also, why I'm doing this video, because see, I was focusing really on that aspect of living at a place. Let's say there's no one in your neighborhood that's outside of your group, and you're watching television, or movies in those days. You only know what you see. And I see how the media has a strong influence over one's orientation. They can make you think, okay, this is the flavor of the month. This is another, and I had an opportunity. I've mentioned before that I'm a veteran. I was in the U.S. Navy, and I was finished boot camp and then our technical training school. And I was during training school. I had it was not a date, but I had spoken to this person. I had gone off base. We had to go off base for something, and it was a white fellow who was in school with me. And we were at a restaurant. It was he was interested in this white girl, a friend of mine. We were all friends, and how'd it go now? So it was an innocent meeting, but we were at a restaurant eating, and then he mentions now. I thought nothing of just sitting and eating. He was not my boyfriend. I had no love interest in him, and vice versa. We both in the military, and we just eating lunch. And he said to me, out of the blue, he said, if my grandfather saw me sitting with you or sitting eating with you, he would be angry. Something to that effect. So I said, I wish I remember exactly what I said, but I felt I took this as an opportunity to educate this young white fellow. And I educated him about Black history. Then this is in the 1980s. This is 1988. Yeah, this is 1988, in the summer of 1988. And I mentioned something in history. I wish I could remember what it was. And I just remember his response, though, what I said. He said, wow, I never knew that. Boy, you should teach the rest of us this. I kid you not, folks. See, white people, young white people, are being taught by their parents or their relatives or their neighbors or their teachers. This guy was from Was he from? He was from Illinois, and he started showing me. We were in a car. I forget what it was he driving. I know it was in a vehicle or something, and he was there, and he was showing me around the suburbs. Yeah, I'm just remembering this now. And it was mentioned about the homes of these white people, something about them. But it was a window into seeing their mentality, that their neighborhoods are created, segregated. And this is what he was showing me. We have to learn from each other. This man only knew what his grandfather told him. You don't associate. Why? Why did the grandfather teach him that? This is in the North, and they didn't have, oh yeah, they had slavery in the North, but Illinois wasn't a slave state. Oh, I don't remember when it was founded, but it didn't have slavery. But it developed anti-black sentiment, like the rest of the Midwest. Why did this develop? Well, you have people, social engineers, and they want you to think certain things about certain people for its political purposes. Just like today, they'll teach you anything in the media. They teach you to fear. They teach you either to laugh or mock black people, like buckwheats and Farinas, but didn't want to really show you the humanity of some of us, that we could be in a love interest, that we could be beautiful. And it didn't want the black woman in particular to marry into the white man. It wanted to keep us socially segregated. Hollywood has a strong fear against the black womb, the black family, anything that comes out of her womb. But whites need to be educated, just like I had to educate that white fellow. We have to educate one another. People are teaching lies about groups. We have to discover what the lies are and dismantle them. I didn't see that guy again in school. I graduated not too long after that. But I felt to make a positive statement of a situation. You have to educate people. Some people are educatable and some aren't. But the other reason why I mentioned this story, there was another incident. Yeah, I was still in boot camp. And you had a white girl from California, blonde and blue-eyed. And she says, I think we were in the shower room or something. And there was a whole bunch of us. And she says, oh, my daddy's a redneck. My daddy's a redneck. And it's like, is she bragging? Or why is she saying this? And I remember another white woman who was an officer. And I was out in public with her and other black people. We knew each other from, we had the same therapists in the VA, or the VA. Uh, we were part of a group. It was a group therapy session, and she was the only white person. All the rest of us are black. And you find in New York City, you see like almost all the veterans, whether it's mental health or physical health, the mass majority are black people. And you start to wonder what happened to the whites. When I went in the military, most of the people were white. But when you go into the VA hospital, most of the people are black. But either way, so that's how I met the white woman. She was actually older than the rest of us. Yeah, I think she was the oldest actually. Um, and we were to go out after the session, and all of a sudden the white woman starts to look visibly nervous. Now we were just going for a little stroll outside, nothing serious. But she was scared. She said, "Oh well, my mentioned a relative. I think her father. Oh, my father doesn't like black people. Something like that." And we just kind of dismissed her. What's happening here? White people aren't used to being around black people, being outnumbered. Even though we were all service people, we were all veterans. I think she might have still been serving in the military, the white lady. But either way, we were all at least veterans. And we were there because we had similar experiences. That's why we're in the group together. So despite that similar experiences, race was an issue for her. It wasn't an issue for me to have her there, but it was an issue for her to have us there. So why do I mention this? Evidently, as she mentioned, she's from a home that did not like black people. But why does she need to share that? She didn't need to share that sentiment. It's because she was uncomfortable. And so I think we have to be honest, white people. You have to be honest about certain things. And you don't need to say, hey, my folks are racist, or who your relatives are is who they are. But what you should say is, hey, I feel uncomfortable. I've never been around black people before, whatever. But you have to see it, what about black people? Black people are outnumbered in this country by white people, right? So how should we feel being around you? It goes both ways, but historically, blacks were directly or indirectly under white people. And historically, we had to be careful about our relationship with you. So it's interesting, who should really be afraid are blacks. But instead, you were afraid, even amongst your own veteran. And I just thought it really interesting that here we served under the same flag, but then you are seeing a distinction. It's really interesting. So again, I mention all these things that, see, whites are being taught certain things. Whites are socially programmed to not associate with us, to only see us as beings of entertainment, like sports or comedy, but to see us as peers or equals or as intellectuals. You haven't been taught that. So maybe Hollywood, white Hollywood, or Jewish Hollywood should start making films, if you're really not racist, to start showing films of blacks being intellectual, of blacks being in loving relationships, blacks being beautiful, and black people could be, with whites as our peers. Whites and blacks as peers of one another. There are different types of social economics in all of us. You have rich whites and you have rich blacks. You got poor whites and you also have poor blacks. And we could be peers to one another. So if Hollywood is really not biased, hey, start having films that promote the best in all of us. The 1970 movies and stuff, it disguised racism by having reverse racism. That it buffooned whites and made blacks look like that they were smarter. But in actuality, it was really something, it was to blindside you. And it's really to keep you back, to make you think that you made it because now they're making fun of white people. But what's happening is the gerrymandering, the white flight, and the demise of the school system, and the introduction of drugs in the neighborhood to kill you off. So maybe you had movies like The Little Rascals. It has its pluses, that you had people, creative kids, poor kids, who self-managed, who most of the time, resolve their problems and work together. And then other times it did show elements of racism in it. But I think Little Rascals is more positive than the movies that it has out now. See, now, like the movies from the 1980s and 90s were extremely racist against black people, extremely biased. So if you're going to measure apples and oranges, I put on this scale the Little Rascals was something that was more unifying to youngsters versus the movies that came out in the 80s, 90s. We haven't moved forward, really. So those are my thoughts about the Little Rascals and comparing how society teaches one another sentiments about different groups, black and white relationships. You love who you love and you hate who you hate. But hopefully we at least will try to discuss in a civil manner our differences. Yeah, we have to keep the country together. That's my wish, that we keep the country together, but realize that we all have weaknesses. And yes, racism does exist. And, maybe we need to discuss it. Maybe whites need to discuss what they taught, or at least don't perpetuate what you've been taught about others, that is just to harm blacks in particular. So those are my thoughts. And you could write your comments below. Share this video with friends, family members, and if you like this content, feel free to donate to my PayPal me account. You can find the link on my channel, Spirit Journey, and on the banner of my channel on the right hand side, you'll find the PayPal me link. Just click on the link and follow the prompts. Any amount would be appreciated, And I thank you in advance. Peace, love, and joy to all Americans. Take care, guys. Bye bye.